All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go ahead and kick off today's webinar. And thanks for joining today. I want to start with that. We're all so busy in our day-to-day lives, and we really appreciate you being here. For today, we are talking about SOC 2, the audit everyone asks for and almost no one can avoid. So we're going to cut through all the jargon to explain what SOC 2 actually is, why it exists, and how it affects trust, security, and your ability to close deals. We all want that. So whether you're new to SOC 2 or you're just tired of answering the same security questions, this session is for you. Really quickly, my name is Alejandro Ocampo. I am one of the senior customer success managers here. I've been grateful to be in this, I'll say, GRC industry for over 10 years now, and I've been with Johanson for a couple of years as is. Not on the screen, but I do also want to introduce Mark Andia. He is one of our managers here of the customer success team, and he is here to support and also answer any questions we may have at the end of the session. So, in a world where breaches are in the headlines every week, SOC 2 says, we've got this. It's about replacing blind trust with verified assurance. And that's good for you and us. SOC 2 exists to solve a trust problem. As companies outsource data and critical systems to third-party service providers, customers need a reliable way to know their data is protected without auditing every vendor themselves. Can you imagine that? SOC 2 provides a standardized, independent audit that evaluates how well an organization protects data across areas like security, availability, and confidentiality. Instead of relying on claims or questionnaires, customers get consistent, credible assurance from an independent auditor. So in short, SOC 2 exists to build trust at scale, helping customers like yourselves manage risk and helping service providers prove that they operate securely and responsibly. So what is SOC 2? SOC 2 is a security and compliance framework developed by the AICPA, that is the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. You may hear a lot of acronyms today, for service organizations that handle or store customer data. Think of it as a rigorous report card for how companies handle your data. It's less about taxes and more about trust. Keyword trust. SOC 2 reports are typically used to demonstrate to customers, partners, or regulators that a company has effective internal controls in place for handling data securely, reliably, and in compliance with industry standards. Though it is quite common to hear that SOC 2 is a certification, this is a common but totally understandable misunderstanding. It is actually an attestation, and the output is a SOC 2 audit report. And there are two types of audits and reports. A SOC 2 Type 1 says, we've got controls in place, while a SOC 2 Type 2 says, we've been walking the talk for months. And one of the most common questions organizations face when starting SOC 2 is whether to pursue a Type 1 or a Type 2 report. And while they're closely related, they do serve different purposes. Let's talk through them. A Type 1 report looks at control design at a specific point in time. It answers the question, have we designed the right controls? This makes it a strong option for companies that are early in their SOC 2 journey, need to respond to customer requests quickly, or want to establish initial credibility. Think about that prospect who needs to see a SOC 2 report in order to close the deal with urgency. I'm sure we've been familiar with that scenario, and in that scenario, Type 1 is the way. On the other hand, a Type 2 report goes a step further by evaluating not just design, but whether those controls actually operated effectively over a period of time. This answers the more sometimes important question customers ask, can we trust these controls in practice, just not on paper? So the big question, how do we choose? Well, if speed and readiness are your priorities, type 1 is often the right first step. If you're selling to larger or more regulated customers, or SOC 2 is becoming a consistent requirement, type 2 is the long-term destination. As SOC 2 audits are an annual requirement, well, you'll want to eventually be on a rolling 12-month observation period to demonstrate continuous security and compliance monitoring for your customers and your organization. So, in short, type 1 demonstrates intent and readiness, whereas type 2 demonstrates consistency and trust over time. Overall, both a SOC 2 type 1 and a type 2 evaluates how well a company's systems and processes protect data across 5 trust service criteria. We have security, availability, confidentiality, processing integrity, and privacy. Selecting trust service criteria, or TSC, for a SOC 2 report is about matching the criteria to how your service actually operates and what your customers expect. Here's a clear, practical way to do this. So, step 1, we start with security. The security trust service criteria, common criteria, is always required. This is mandatory for all SOC 2 reports. It covers items such as access controls, logical and physical security, and change management as examples. Again, you cannot exclude security. Step 2, we want to decide which additional criteria apply to your organization. Now, the remaining 4 criteria are optional and only included if relevant to your service commitments. Number 1 is availability. You'll want to include this if you promise uptime, SLAs, system reliability, or perhaps are often asked about downtime or disaster recovery. And typical signals would be customers, again, asking about disaster recovery or business continuity planning, or perhaps SLAs and contracts. Confidentiality, you'll definitely want to include if you handle confidential customer business data or store non-public information. Some examples there include internal business data, contracts, pricing, and proprietary files. Processing integrity, you'll want to include this one if you process transactions where accuracy, completedness, or timeliness really matters, or if you're performing calculations, billing, data transformations. And some examples there include payroll processing, financial calculations, and so forth. Last but not least, we have privacy. You'll want to include this if you collect, use, retain, disclose, or delete personal data. Some examples there, names, emails, IP addresses to start. Again, you don't have to include the additional 4. It really depends on your service commitments and the signals you are receiving from customers and prospects. Many of our customers start with just security, and then as they continue to grow and scale their SOC 2 program, they add in those trust service criteria as they see relevant. Overall, including more of the trust service criteria that's appropriate for organization is going to give your customers more assurance. So, we go through the audit and you receive your report. But what's actually in the SOC 2 report? Perhaps it's not the best bedtime reading, but if you love InfoSec, if you love procurement, and I'm sure your customers will love this, it's music to their ears. So section 1 is the Independent Service Auditor's Report. This is the formal opinion from the audit firm stating whether your controls are suitably designed. And for a type 2 report, it also confirms whether those controls operated effectively over a defined period of time. Section 2 is management's assertion. And this is where your company's leadership formally attests that the system description is accurate and that the controls are designed, and if it's a type 2 report, operating as intended. Section 3 is your system description, and this section explains how the service actually works. It describes the services you provide, the technology you use, the people involved, and how customer data moves through the system. It also clearly defines what is in scope for the audit. And section 4, which is the beefiest of the sections in this report, it will show the key controls mapped to the SOC 2 criteria that you've included. For a type 1, auditors can note design deficiencies. Remember, type 1 is that point-in-time audit. Whereas for a type 2 report, the auditor tests each control over time and documents the results. If any exceptions are given during the testing or issues, they are noted here in section 4 per control. Now, I just said exceptions. Bit of a scary word in the audit world and across the board, totally understand that. An exception, which only occurs in SOC 2 type 2 reports, is when a required control was not performed, was performed late, or perhaps performed inconsistently. Perhaps evidence was missing, incomplete, or inaccurate, or simply the control did not meet its stated criteria. For example, an access review was not actually completed as defined. That's a good example there. Another example could be when an employee without security training, they don't do their training during the audit period as defined within your controls and your policies, or perhaps change management approvals were missing for a deployment. Now, the hot question is, does an exception mean I failed? Absolutely. Of course not. Not necessarily, okay? You have minor exceptions, and they often still result in a clean, unqualified opinion. But then you can have systemic or high-risk exceptions. Now, for something of this degree, it may lead to a qualified opinion where the auditor concludes that most, but not all controls meet the trust service criteria, with one or more exceptions significant to note. Keep in mind that you can't technically fail a SOC 2 audit because it's not a pass or fail test, but rather this is an opinion-based audit and report. How do your customers view exceptions when they're reading your report? You can have one-off or administrative misses, like an employee who misses security training. Probably not a big deal and usually acceptable in a customer's eyes. However, repeated or security impacting issues, that can be red flags, and that can really cause some issues, maybe delaying a contract signature or just in terms overall asking more questions, which is kind of defeating the purpose of getting a SOC 2 report. So best practices here, you want to document all root causes and remediation efforts. You want to be ready to explain exceptions to customers where applicable. And really, this is a learning process that we're going through. So you want to show improvement in the next audit cycle where appropriate. So in short, a SOC 2 exception is evidence that a control didn't work exactly as intended, not an automatic sign of poor security. So what does SOC 2 mean for you? What's in it for you? You're not just buying software, you're trusting vendors with your data. SOC 2 helps shorten the security questionnaire pain. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room has experienced that, and lets your team focus on what they actually want to do. Surely, most, if not everyone in this room has received those lengthy, tedious, lovely security questionnaires, as I alluded to earlier. We want to avoid that so we can put all of our focus into what we do day to day. Skipping SOC 2 creates a lot of risks here. It creates real business and security risks overall. Without independent assurance, customers have limited visibility into how we protect their data, which again can slow deals, increase those security questionnaires, or stop procurement altogether. It also increases operational risk. SOC 2 helps identify gaps in access controls, change management, and incident response, areas where small issues can turn into major security incidents if left unchecked. And finally, not having SOC 2 can damage trust. Again, trust is a key word. In a market where SOC 2 is a baseline expectation, the absence of it can signal immaturity or unmanaged risk, even if strong controls exist. So in short, skipping SOC 2 saves time upfront, but increases risk cost, and friction long term. A question we often receive here at Johanson Group: do I need a GRC platform? There are tons of vendors and players in this space these days. The short answer is no, but here is why you might want to consider one. First off, with a GRC platform, we can centralize all of your SOC 2 evidence, controls, and documentation, one single source of truth. Functionality within these tools often includes automated reminders, tasks, and compliance workflows. Again, staying on top of your SLAs as an example, we don't want to breach any of those where possible. For us and for as a team, it really simplifies the collaboration with our customers, as we can traditionally log into these tools with our own auditor, viewing access, collaborate on the evidence collection, and so forth. We want to reduce manual spreadsheet errors. If you're not using a readiness tool or a GRC platform, typically it's done in a spreadsheet and tracking across some type of repository like a SharePoint or Google Drive for all your evidence. As you can imagine, that's a lot of manual tracking, for lack of a better word, and we are humans and we're prone to errors here and there in that effort. And though we are just discussing SOC 2 today, it is helpful if you're scaling or managing multiple frameworks. A lot of our customers move into ISO, or perhaps they need to have a HIPAA audit, and a lot of these customers use those frameworks in the GRC platforms, and typically they can leverage their existing SOC 2 controls where relevant across all the frameworks managed in one single pane and one single source of truth. So again, the short answer is no, you don't need one, but I would highly consider in terms of resourcing, budget, and really just efficiency across the board. So we always want to focus on what else Johanson Group offers beyond SOC 2. We're pretty robust in the examinations and certifications we provide. For example, ISO 27001 is quite popular with our SOC 2 customers. Typically, they'll get their SOC 2 report, and whether they're hearing word from their customers about, hey, are you ISO certified? Or maybe you're just going international and you want to enhance your internal risk management program, ISO 27001 will be a good example and a good framework to pursue. In addition, we have other areas like PCI, DSS, HIPAA, SOC 1s, and so forth. So as you can see on the screen here, we have a lot of offerings. If anything beyond SOC 2 calls to you, please feel free to contact your customer success manager. And we'll also include our sales representative email as well. In addition to services, we take a lot of pride in our partner and alliance services. It's great to have a platform. It's great to have all these frameworks. However, I think the reality is that oftentimes, SOC 2 is not your full-time job. You have so many other areas to focus on day to day, which is why we have partners who can help with items such as implementing your readiness platform, helping you write your controls that are relevant to your business, or maybe you just need a partner to do some penetration testing or some cyber insurance referrals. We offer all of that in terms of our partnerships, who we have a pretty expansive network. Again, if any of these on the screen interest you, we would be more than happy to send you some introductions via your CSM. Feel free to reach out to them directly. Okay. I really hope that this session was helpful, just as an initial primer for SOC 2, some of the technical information about it, but more importantly, how a SOC 2 can benefit your organization and some of the risks involved if you are not SOC 2 compliant. At this time, I would love to open up the floor here. If we have any questions at all, we'd be more than happy, myself and Mark, to answer them. And I believe we can leave questions in the Q&A if I'm not mistaken. I'll keep an eye if any are popping up here.
Yeah, I'm monitoring it on my side as well. Yeah, pop in anything, guys. Anything that comes to mind. We're happy to help here.
And while we're waiting for questions to come in, I'll just ask you, Mark, anything you want to add to the color of this conversation?
The one thing I would add on the topic of exceptions is, exceptions are common. Exceptions happen, you know, more often than not. And a clean report is great, right? With zero exceptions is fantastic. But we all know that like businesses are operating, there's a lot of moving pieces, an observation period, usually the first go around is around 3 months. And then from there, you want to extend it into the industry standard, which is 12 months. So imagine a year's worth of evidence, right? It's hard to be perfect. So exceptions are common. And so long as you're documenting root causes and remediation plans, um, they shouldn't have a major impact so long as you can explain and you're aware of the situation and can explain that very clearly to your customers and the end reader of your SOC 2 report. In addition to that, you can ask for a section 5 for your report, which is basically like a recap or a management's notes where you can kind of explain the exception that's noted in section 4, and explain what happened, what you've done since, how it's been remediated, and just kind of build the trust and kind of reinforce that this either A, won't happen again, or that you're aware of it and you've got some controls in place to make sure you're mitigating that going forward. But it's a question we get often around exceptions, and it can be scary when you're moving and increasing your observation period from a shorter 3-month period to a 12-month period to get into that industry standard. But we're all human. We do the best we can, and security is a continuous effort. So continuing to improve on your security year over year is going to be where you see the biggest impact. So
I love that. Thanks for adding that color as well. It's a learning process, especially if this is your first time going through a SOC 2. Things are going to happen, exceptions may occur, and it's normal. So the goal is to learn from it. And then as the next cycle comes, the next audit, we can improve where needed.
yes, exactly. And then another thing I'd like to add that is an advantage of using a readiness platform. There are many out there. We work with mostly all of them, honestly. So we know what the readiness platforms look like. So if you do decide to move your security program into a readiness platform, the advantage is a lot of time savings. Obviously, as Alejandro mentioned, just staying organized and setting up alerts when a control fails, so you can be reminded to go in there and remediate. But additionally, as like you're thinking through additional trust service criteria that you may need to implement on a subsequent SOC 2 audit, you can always enable those extra criteria within your platform and see what the workload is going to be as you prep for that, right? And you may even consider just start remediating any of those controls and implementing those controls to ensure that you're ready for that next audit when it comes around. Because usually, if you started a SOC 2 audit that's just with just the security criteria and scope, it's not a best practice to add additional criteria in the middle of an audit or in the middle of an observation period, just because there's going to be a gap of evidence. So if you're hearing it from your customers, or if you're feeling those signals around maybe needing confidentiality or processing integrity, it's always a good talk track to tell your customers, hey, it's not in scope for this audit that we're currently in, but I can commit to adding it for the next one. That usually helps get the customers comfortable and move forward. So just wanted to share that little quick note with you guys, as it's another question we get often.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mark. And as we're waiting for any potentials to come in, I'd love just to ask you a question if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just in your experience being in this space for a long time now, any other common pitfalls, or I'll just say pitfalls, that customers run into as they're doing their SOC 2 audit for the first time?
Yes. At least as it relates to our process, it's I would say evidence requests. And I think this is going to be kind of common throughout the whole space here. It's like if you're using a readiness platform, or if you're collecting your evidence manually via spreadsheets, shared drives, however it might be, um, these audits are designed to look in the weeds and to spot check everything that you provided with us. So there will be additional evidence requests that come down the pike during the actual audit itself. Sometimes, our customers get confused or they get concerned because it's like, oh no, did I provide the wrong evidence? Is this going to result in an exception? And oftentimes it's no. The answer is no to that. It's more like we're looking for additional reinforcement to the evidence you provided, or it's a lot of like yes or no questions that come down the pike from our audit team. And that may or may not delay the timeline of the audit, right? So like one thing is yes, you do a lot of work up front to prep for the audit and to maintain your controls, if it's a SOC 2 type 2 during that observation period. But the work doesn't finish there, right? The audit itself is kind of a collaborative approach where we're doing our best to review the evidence, and then we're going to send you questions to make sure that we understand what you've provided. And that also is going to require your engagement to make sure that this moves forward smoothly. So sometimes why I bring this up is this can be a hurdle or a challenge or raise concerns for our customers, but it doesn't mean that we're not moving forward, or there's exceptions that are going to be noted. Again, just to reiterate, this just means we're trying to make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's and making sure that we're going to deliver a quality report for you. And this may or may not impact timelines depending on how quickly you're able to respond. Obviously, we know there's a lot of moving pieces. This can also be kind of streamlined if you're working with like a readiness platform or an MSP, one of our partners that are consultants that can help answer these questions for you during the audit, to kind of let you take a backseat and focus on other priorities at your organization. But yeah, that's the biggest piece. And obviously audit prep is another piece. Audit prep for any of you folks that are relatively new to SOC 2, it's going to be kind of like a deer in the headlights moment. There's a lot to look through, a lot to consider, and then assessing which controls make sense for your business, because by nature, SOC 2 is not prescriptive. So like you're going to have to think through the controls, as our firm, for customers that aren't using. Well, actually, this has changed for our customers that are like net new, right? Going through SOC 2 for the first time. We do have a list of controls that we have determined are important to us that we'll always share with you, right? So you'll be able to assess those controls, understand what they mean, determine if they're going to be, if they're implemented, if they're applicable. And if they're not, we ask for you guys to let us know why, what changes have you made to the control matrix, whatever it might be. And that'll kind of help reduce the noise and kind of help guide you into what to think through when implementing these SOC 2 controls. On the flip side, if you're using a platform, they're going to give you a long list of controls that matter to them, right? And that's going to be a deer in the headlights moment as well, where you're like, I don't know how to scope this down. So the readiness prep piece is kind of jarring sometimes, for folks that are brand new to this. So we're here as a firm to help guide you think through that piece there, as well as have a bunch of partners in our network that can help you get into the weeds with that and actually help you define the controls, narrow it down to what really matters for your organization, as we need to kind of also remain independent from that area. But I hope that helps. Oh, looks Excellent. Like we got a question from Janet here. The audit duration is 3 to 12 months. What determines the duration? Great question. So I'll take a stab at it, and Alejandro, if you want to add some color or correct me and keep me honest if I'm wrong here. But the industry standard is 12 months for an observation period. That's what we call it here at Johanson Group, is an observation period, where basically you're proving that you're maintaining your compliance, right? But for an organization's first SOC 2 type 2, it is acceptable for it to be a shorter period of 3 months. Okay, so the 3-month period is acceptable for anyone's first audit. From there, the expectation is that you maintain your controls, because we will aim to move into a 12-month period and avoid gaps. What we're trying to do is avoid any gaps in observation. So, for example, if you decided, or if you expected a 3-month observation period year over year, you would have a 9-month gap every year where there was no testing or no audit to cover that 9-month gap, which isn't a good look. As a firm, we like to watch our customers grow into the industry standard and continue to maintain their compliance year over year without any gaps. That's going to be what's best for you, because then it avoids any of those questions. What happened in that 9-month period that you weren't audited against? Why weren't you audited? Did you just kind of like sit on your hands and not monitor your compliance? Are you just cherry picking when you want to be compliant? Those are questions that you kind of want to avoid, and instances that kind of create friction with your customers. So to answer your question, it's 3 months for the first one, and then we move into a 12-month. You can decide to do a 6-month period right off the bat if you'd like, if you have the resources, if it's something you're comfortable doing. But we'll never see an observation period with the Johanson Group that's shorter than 3 months for that first one. Does that help?
Yeah, it's a great question, Janet. And just to add some one little tidbit there. I always like to, think about it of putting yourself in your customer's shoes when it comes to like having a 12-month window eventually, if not the first time, the second time at least, right? They're going to want to see that you're continuously monitoring your SOC 2 framework, the controls, all the policies, all that good stuff over a 12-month period continuously is the key word. That way, it just gives greater reassurance and trust being the key word that we discussed today. So, everything Mark said, plus that little tidbit. I hope that's helpful, Janet. You're welcome. Just got your thank you.
And yeah, Janet, and for everyone else on the call here, I believe Alejandro has a slide at the end of this that has all of our contact information. And you can email us directly if you have any other questions that come up. We're happy to help.
I don't, but maybe we can throw it in the chat if we have
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, let me throw it in the chat here. Actually, I don't know where the chat is here. I just see the Q&A.
Yeah, that's all right. We can always also follow up as necessary with individuals if that's okay. Just with our general CSM email
Yeah, perfect.
contact, and we can go from there. But otherwise, oh, we have another question from Janet. Thank you. As an auditor, we often ask for both SOC 1 Type 2 and SOC 2 Type 2. Are these redundant? You want to take a stab at that one, Mark?
Yeah, so SOC 1 is aimed at a different control set. The methodology there is looking at financial controls, right? So like internal controls over financial reporting. There's also ITGCs, which are just IT general controls versus like a SOC 2 Type 2 that's looking more at like customer data versus financial reporting. So they're not redundant. I would say like if you're working with banks or anyone that's processing like cardholder data or any financial reporting, that would be a SOC 1. A SOC 2 is more generalized. It's more for a service-based company that's working for, that you're just processing customer data in general versus anything financial. We get this question often, and we talk customers off the ledge like, hey, I don't think a SOC 1 really is like pertinent here for your situation. It's more so looking and determining what the client base is that's asking around this, and what your client base is if they're processing any financial reporting, that would warrant a SOC 1. Okay, great. I was going to keep going there, and I was going to say SOC 1 is also very, very bespoke. So oftentimes we get customers that just need a SOC 1 to get one customer over the finish line, right? Like the controls that matter to that one specific customer are what are in scope for this audit, and we audit against controls that are particularly specific to one customer that this is important for, like for our customer, right? Our customer is getting requested a SOC 1 by one customer that needs the SOC 1 because they might be a bank or something, versus a SOC 2 that's more around your own global controls for your organization and how that matters and impacts your entire customer base. So I hope that helps.
Great question. Okay. If there are no more questions within this webinar, we are going to go ahead and conclude and give you some more time back. Again, like from my heart, just want to say thank you everybody for taking the time to join this webinar today. This will be the first of many, and we hope it was valuable just to discuss some of the SOC 2 technical details, but also, of course, the value of going through a SOC 2 audit and having a SOC 2 report. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the week, and we hope to see you soon.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.